I'm curious of how you just got started in this field in general and then moved into love addiction or relationships, Janie?
When I was a registered intern, between a student intern and a registered intern, one of my, everything they tell you to do in grad school, right, was exactly what happened to me that you don't do, or what they at least say you don't do. But one of my first clients was a young woman who was sexually assaulted. And I was probably a new registered intern at the time. And she was brought to me. I was with a counseling center that was connected to a church. So I didn't necessarily know who I was going to see because they were getting funded by the church. And when this young woman had come into my office, I had discovered that her sexual assault had just happened literally just a few days before I had seen her. And to make a very long story short, so I worked with her a year through this church program because it was funded by the church. And through that process of working with her, there was a curiosity that was birthed as to this young woman who I had met who was sexually assaulted, that through the process of working with her, then became what they called a go-go dancer. And she became a dancer and was pretty much became her way of life. And at that time, I got real curious, like, how could somebody that was sexually assaulted, that had this huge trauma, now turn around and essentially do this type of work? So that was my first curiosity. And there was a woman who I was working with at the time who was a CSAT, and I was in a group supervision. And at the time, I had did some training through Mark Lacer's program. And I remember I was mentioning that in my supervision with this group, and her name was Vicky. Vicky had mentioned that she was a CSAT, and I was curious about the CSAT program, and she had just thought it would widen my lens a little bit more than the training that I had done, and that it would help me work with this type of client. So that's kind of how I initially was birthed into being introduced to the uh, CSAT community, and started me looking into what that looked like in order for me to start that process. So it was birthed by that client. And the amazing thing about that is that that client has not been a client for a long time, because I've been here since 2005. But she follows me on social media, and I have a very public profile, and she occasionally will send me messages, and I get to see the fruit of the work that we started so long ago. And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful process, because I know that the work that we do does make a difference, especially this particular client, which was one of my first clients, embodies that. So yeah, that's how it got started.
That's wonderful. I have a question. So is the Women Redeemed program, is it specifically for women that are struggling with sex and love addiction, or does it have a broader context? Can you tell us about it?
So Woman Redeemed is a program, or multiple programs underneath the Woman Redeemed program, that's actually birthed out of the legacy of my eldest sister. Her name was Carmen, and she was in a toxic relationship. And as we know, the most dangerous time for a woman is when she's leaving a domestic abusive toxic relationship. And my sister became a statistic. And when that had occurred as a young person, and through the years, there was a lot of curiosity over what I've gone through in my family as a result of that. So Woman Redeemed was birthed out of her legacy, because she's not here, but there are so many women that are here that have an opportunity to get to the other side and experience healthy relationships with themselves and with others. So Women Redeemed is targeted specifically towards women. The broader umbrella is toxic relationships, but because of my work in the CSAT community, we get a lot of women that identify as a sex and love addict. But most of them, through the years, if we kind of just look at that broader umbrella, it's usually just experiencing just multiple unhealthy relationships, and they get to a point and they're like, I can't keep doing this. I'm getting older, or my children are being affected. There's something that draws them in. But we have very strategic ways to communicate to women without putting the label on, right? Because a lot of times people will ask that question, like, because our programs are pretty full. We have a 12-week program that I facilitate myself about 3 times a year, with the exception of last year. As most people know, I was on 90 Day Fiance, the last resort, which took 3 weeks out, and some other things, so was not able to do that last year. So we have a 3-week program, a 3-month program, I should say, for Women Redeem, which is a weekly program, and we strategically do it because it's, as we know, for just the way that the brain works, we need to have a 90-day detox period.